All right, let's just jump right in. We live in a world that's changing like crazy, right? So how do we make sure the most important system we have, how we actually learn, can keep up? We're about to look at a really powerful way of rethinking education for a future that honestly is already here.
So, just look at this. This is from the World Economic Forum. On the left, you've got the top skills for 2015. On the right, just 5 years later, it's 2020. I mean, the change is staggering. Skills like quality control, they just vanished from the top 10. And look what shot up the list. Creativity goes from dead last to number 3. And brand new skills like emotional intelligence and cognitive flexibility just appear out of nowhere. It's so clear that being able to adapt isn't just a bonus anymore, it's everything.
And this brings us to the biggest question of all. If the goalposts are constantly moving, how on earth do we prepare students for jobs and for challenges that we can't even imagine yet? What's the game plan?
We're in what people are calling the fourth industrial revolution. Think AI, automation, everything connected to everything. This new world doesn't just need people who have a lot of facts memorized, it needs people who know how to learn.
But here's the disconnect. The way we often teach, the traditional models many of us went through, they weren't really built for creating that kind of flexible, adaptable person. There's a real mismatch between what's needed and what we're doing.
To really get this, let's look at a pretty common model called constructive alignment. It makes a lot of sense, right? It's a top-down system where a teacher lines up the goals of the course, the activities, and the final test. It's organized, it's tidy, but the whole focus is on the institution, on the teacher, and on making the student fit into their system.
Now, this kind of teacher-first thinking can sometimes lead us down the path of learning styles. We've all heard it, right? Oh, I'm a visual learner, or I'm an auditory learner. But, as this quote points out, a ton of research shows that this whole idea is basically a myth. Trying to fit teaching into these little boxes just doesn't really work.
So it really boils down to two completely different ways of thinking. On the left, you've got the teacher-centered way, which is all about fitting the student into a preset system. It's about labeling. But the student-centered approach on the right, it flips that script completely. It's not about the system. It's about giving the student the tools they need to adapt to any system. It's about empowerment, not a label.
Okay, so if the old model has its issues, what's the alternative?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. We start to see this huge shift away from the institution and towards the learner.
And it's built around this idea called Flexible Student Alignment, or FSA. The goal here isn't to try and jam a square peg into a round hole. No, it's about empowering the peg, the student, to understand its own shape, and then figure out how to align itself with any hole, any challenge, or any new environment it comes across.
So, what's the engine that powers all of this? What's the secret sauce? It's a skill called metacognition. And it sounds super academic, but it's actually so simple. It just means thinking about your own thinking. It's being aware of how you learn, what works for you, and where you get stuck.
And why is this such a total game changer? Well, the research is pretty clear. The Education Endowment Foundation found that teaching students these skills has a massive impact. It's super cheap to implement, and get this, it's especially powerful for students who might be struggling because it puts them back in the driver's seat of their own learning.
Okay, so this all sounds amazing in theory. I mean, who wouldn't want this? But how do you actually do it? How does a student learn to think about their own thinking in a way that's actually useful?
Well, there's a practical, hands-on framework for this, and it's called RAPPLE. Think of it as the roadmap that guides students on this journey of self-discovery.
Here's how it breaks down. First, students discover their own unique learning profile, not to slap a label on themselves, but just as a starting point for a conversation. Then, they build their own digital toolkit, like a personal portfolio, to track their journey. And then, this is the most important part, they practice and reflect. They do real tasks, they get feedback, and they tweak their approach, again and again. It makes learning an active, dynamic process.
So, after all that, what's the payoff? What actually happens when you give students these tools to take charge of their own learning? Well, the results are, they're pretty transformative. Not just for their grades, but for them as people.
I mean, listen to what the students themselves say. This one realized the course wasn't just about learning some topic. For them, it was like growing a root system, a core ability to adapt to any change that comes their way beyond whatever skills are on some top 10 list.
And then there's this one. This student talks about a full-on personal transformation. They said, a different me showed up.
They left more confident, with better communication skills, and with a real sense of purpose. I mean, that's what this is all about.
And it's not just the students. This is what gets me. Check out this quote from a university tutor who was a bit skeptical at first. They said they were blown away by how deeply the students understood themselves. And then they say it's the first time they enjoyed spending 20 hours marking papers. When you can make a teacher enjoy marking, you know you're onto something special.
So really, the bottom line is this. When we shift our focus from just teaching subjects to teaching the skill of learning itself, we're not just making better students. We're helping grow flexible, adaptive, and independent people who are ready for whatever the world throws at them.
Which leaves us with a final, really big thought. I mean, we've used technology to completely re-engineer entire industries, transportation, shopping, you name it. So the question is, isn't it time we use that same bold thinking to re-engineer learning itself? To finally put the learner and their incredible capacity to adapt right at the very heart of everything we do?